Hello everyone, my name is Shelby and I work for the Charlotte Harbor Environmental Center. Today I'm at Cedar Point Environmental Park and it's a beautiful day to be out by the water. So I'm going to head out to the water and I hope to find our naturalist Gail Playa, and we're going to look for some cool creatures. Alright, so let's go find Gail. Oh look, there she is. Hey Gail.
Hey Shelby, come on in. Put them in here. So here we are on Cedar Point. We have Lemon Bay out to the north and to the south. Lemon Bay ends at around Venice and goes all the way down to Charlotte Harbor. Lemon Bay is an estuary, and if you remember what an estuary is, it's a protected area of water that where the freshwater and the saltwater come together. So we have a way of measuring the salt in the water. And if you go out in the Gulf of Mexico, you're going to find salt in the water that's around 32 to 34 up here. And if you're drinking fresh water, of course that doesn't have much salt in it at all. It'll have less than 1. And these are in parts per thousand. So we're going to take a sample of this water and see, what do you think? If we have fresh water and salt water mixing, then what are we going to have? Wow, that's really interesting here. It is mostly salt water today. Here it's running around between 32 and 34, about 33 parts per thousand. Now normally I've been out here where it's about 25 here, and that totally depends on the rain, the wind. The tide is driving this out. It's driving water into the bay, and so right now it is around seawater strength. So the animals that live here have to be able to take a wide range of salinities. So they're pretty tough critters. So let's take the trusty net and see what we can find. Oh, but here's another one. This is a different species of pipefish than we saw before. This is the short-nosed pipefish. His little head looks like a seahorse. Long and skinny. And like the seahorse, it's the daddy pipefish that has the babies. There's a tiny tulip snail. Tulip snails can get to be about 5 or 6 inches long. This is a baby one. Put him in here, maybe he'll come out. Oh, wow. And this is a spider crab, or sometimes called a decorative crab. He's called a decorative crab because he likes to stick things, seaweed, bits of shell, that kind of thing on top of his shell. His shell actually has little hooks on it. If you looked at it under a microscope, you'd see little hooks. This is a baby blue crab. He's probably maybe about 3 weeks old. And when I say 3 weeks old, it's 3 weeks from metamorphosing from the larval stage. Ooh, Mr. Pincher. Mr. Pincher. A little bit bigger blue crab. And yes, they all start in here. They come in from the ocean as larvae, and then they settle out in the estuaries, in the grass beds, and grow up. That's a blenny. Blenny's a little bottom fish. They often like to make homes in discarded cans. Sometimes they're called beer can blennies. Blennies will get to be, maybe about twice that size. This is called sea pork. And this is a particularly nice one. Sea pork is a colonial animal, and the animal that makes this is closer related to you than a snail or a worm or that kind of thing, because when it's a larva, it swims around in the water. It looks like a little tadpole. In fact, it's called a tadpole larvae. And when it decides to become an adult, it sucks down on some kind of substrate, a log or a dock or a piece of shell or something, and it stops being a swimming animal, and it comes into kind of a blob, really. If you look really closely, you'll see there's little openings in here, and those are the in-current and the ex-current openings. The animal kind of just sucks water in and then spits it out and strains the plankton and the good stuff out of the water. We have the mudflat, and it's the intertidal zone here where part of the day the tide comes in and floods it, and then part of the day it goes out like it is right now. When we look down here, we can see there's a lot of activity going on. These piles can either be lugworms or another kind of worm. I did find the acorn worm in one of these, but you'll see that the pile is associated with a little depression in the mud. And what that worm is doing is sucking mud into his mouth, into his digestive tract, and then when he's gotten all the good stuff out of it, it comes out in a little pile. So he's got his burrow is a U shape, and he's sucking in one end and he's pooping it out the other end. So you see, there's a lot going on here. It looks just like a bunch of mud, but you see a lot going on. Right here is the onuphid worm, too. Onuphid worm pastes a whole bunch of grass and shells around its tube, and it just sticks right up there. He'll come out and grab around in the mud, grab things. These worms are called spaghetti worms. The spaghetti worm's pasta comes out of its head. It's really not something you'd like to be fed. And they live burrowed in the ground, and all that stringy spaghetti comes out and lays on the surface of the sand, and it grabs up food and takes it to the mouth, which is in the middle of all that spaghetti. Unfortunately, this one has been rooted up out of its ground, and it's not very happy. Oysters provide food for a lot of different creatures. Crabs, blue crabs love them. Stone crabs love them. They also filter the water. They can. They're constant when they're underwater. These are live. And they provide substrate. And as I said before, they provide a whole nother habitat for shelter for animals to live in, plants to stick onto. This one had. This is some more of that that sea pork. Yeah. Also called a tunicate. Now we're in the mangrove swamp, and this is the real coast of Florida right here. And you can imagine when the settlers and the first explorers came to Florida, they came in their boats, and this is what they found, this impenetrable tangle of roots and trees. How they got even into the interior, I don't know. This is the real Florida on the estuary here. We have 3 different types of mangroves. The red mangrove is the one that you're going to see right here in the water. It's the one with the prop roots. Sometimes it's called the walking tree because it looks like it has legs. Those prop roots are important to the mangrove because they help bring air down to the roots in the ground. When you live in the water, the soil under the water, underground, doesn't have much oxygen in it. And the plants need oxygen in their roots for them to grow. So the prop roots bring that oxygen into the water. In the red mangrove also, the prop roots help filter the salt out of the water. And this is how they can live in salt water. The next mangrove you'll see up a little bit further and sometimes intermingled with the red mangrove is the black mangrove. And you can tell the black mangrove because it doesn't have prop roots. It has these little, what are called pneumatophores, sticking up out of the ground like little straws. And they also provide the service to the plant of bringing oxygen down to the roots. Now the black mangrove has a different strategy for taking care of salt. It sucks the salt water into its body and it excretes it out the leaves. And sometimes you can see salt crystals on there. This is the white mangrove. You can tell it's a white mangrove because it's rounded at the top of the leaf, right here. You also need to look for the glands that are at the base of the leaf. The glands exude sugar, which attracts insects that will pollinate the flowers. You find the white mangrove usually a little bit more inland than the black and the red mangrove, but I often find them all mixed up together. The mangrove swamp actually provides a lot of services to human beings. One is that it protects the shoreline. You have the roots catching the sediment in the roots and stabilizing the shoreline like that. And you also have the dense roots breaking the force of the waves that come during storms, and that prevents erosion. Those dense roots also supply a lot of habitat for animals like fish, crabs, shrimp, and the red mangrove in particular can filter pollutants out with their roots. That is a baby stone crab. Have you ever had stone crab claws? That's just about as little as they get. He's clamping up because he's not too happy right now. And then Shelby found this stone crab claw. A little bit bigger. Not quite big enough to eat yet, but... Now this stone crab claw is not from a dead stone crab. It's actually from a molt. You know, the stone crab has a very hard shell, like all crabs. And the only way they can grow is to shed their shell. And while their shell is soft, they pump it up with water and they actually grow right away. Sometimes the smaller ones can be twice the size that they were before. And you can tell this is a molt because One, it doesn't stink. And two, it's all hollow inside. The stone crab and the blue crab come out, they crack the back of their shell. And then they come out just like if you were taking your arms out of a sweater. And the shell is whole there. And the crab comes out. And he's very vulnerable at this state because he's soft. And if you've ever had soft shell crab before, that's what it is. And it takes maybe a day or so for it to harden back up, and then he's okay again. This particular blue crab has a much smaller claw, and that's because sometime in the past he lost his claw, probably in a fight with another blue crab. Or maybe a fish tried to eat him and he just let go of his claw. They can do that. They can just let go of their claw. It's called autotomize. And then they grow a new one. It grows in a little sac where it's going to be. And then when the crab molts, it comes out of the sac and it grows. It'll take a couple more molts before this claw is back to the normal size. Blue crabs have back fins. Ow! You're a pitcher. Stop that. And they're very good swimmers. In fact, the scientific name for blue crab is Calanectes sabatus, and that means beautiful swimmer. And you'll often see them swimming around on the surface. Use these paddle.
I want to give a big thank you to Miss Gill for guiding us through Southwest Florida's amazing estuary ecosystems. We waded waist deep in the water with marine life and walked through mudflats filled with unique subterranean creatures. The mangroves that frame our shores and protect our coasts also play home to a variety of sea creatures that find safe harbor hidden among their roots. I want to thank you all for joining us today and invite you to explore your own communities where animal neighbors may be closer than you think. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for coming.